Hey, seventh grade. It's Friday, the last day of the week, and the last day of our detective story, Hit and Run, which you started yesterday. I wonder if you finished it, and if so, what you thought. One of the things that I really love about reading mystery stories is you get to sort of put the pieces together like a logic puzzle. I don't know if you guys ever did those in math class or just for fun, but that is one of my favorite things to do. When I was a kid, I used to buy these books at the grocery store where you could use this chart to sort of check off different facts that you had to sort of by process of elimination figure out who did something. And I thought this story had a little bit of that because as you read, you're given clues. One of the things Oh, and so I'm going to put one of those logic puzzles in the Google folder for you to fill out. This is totally optional. It's just if you're like me, and that sounds like a fun way to pass a homeschool afternoon. One of the things I wanted to call your attention to as you're reading is we've talked in class a lot about the difference between a first person story and a third person story. So, a first person story, of course, is when you're reading from one particular person's point of view and you get pronouns like I did this and then I did that, and you sort of see it through their eyes. A third person talks about he did and then she did and they did. So you're sort of outside of one particular person's point of view. But when you're writing in the third person, as the author, you can either choose to be omniscient in the way that you tell the story so that your reader hears all the perspectives of what different characters are thinking and feeling. He thought this, but then she thought that. Or you can do what the author did in this story, which is only to give us a limited point of view. So even though it was told in the third person, we didn't really get to understand the inner workings of other people's hearts and minds. We only got a little bit of that. So I wanted you to think about that as you read and just notice it, because good writers are always noticing what other writers do. I also wanted to call your attention to irony in the story. We talked about irony a bit during our unit on humility. And I also shared with you yesterday in the email I sent your parents, and then I added it to the Google spreadsheet. It's at the end under additional resources, a video from TED Ed Academy about situational irony. So this story has some really interesting ways of using irony, and I wonder if you picked up on those. So that's the second thing. The first thing is perspective, right? That I want you to notice that it's in a third person point of view, but that we're not omniscient. We don't know what everyone's thinking. So I want you to notice whose perspective and thinking do we get. Second thing I want you to notice is where do you see irony, and in particular, situational irony. And so if you haven't, you can watch that quick TED video and then think about that in relation to the story. And then the third thing I wanted to introduce you to, which is an element that you'll find in a lot of detective stories if you continue to read those, and I hope that you will, is the idea of a red herring. I don't know if you've ever heard that before, but red herring is an idiom, and it's an idiom that's used to talk about when an author sort of gives you one thing or one picture to think about, and so all of your attention is over here, kind of like a magician, but actually what's really happening that's important is happening over here. And so that also happens in this story, and I wonder if you can find what the red herring is. So the three things I'm asking you to look for, one more time: perspective. We have a limited perspective. Whose perspective do we have in the story? Irony. How does this story show a situational irony? And then finally, what is the red herring that the author gives us to call our attention to one thing when actually something else is happening in the story? You don't have to, but if you have time and you want to, I'd love to hear from you. You can email me at lsmallwood@mylegacyschool.com. And I would love it if you want to answer those three questions. It's not for a grade. It's just to be in touch. I'd love to hear what you think as you're reading and what you thought about this detective story. You could give me a quick review. So that'd be fun. I'd love to hear from you. The other things you're working on today, of course, are finishing your spelling. When you do this cumulative review page, you do not have to rewrite that whole paragraph. They're just asking you to find 20 errors. So go ahead and you can just circle, cross out, and then rewrite what the correct way would be. You don't need to rewrite the whole paragraph if you don't want to. And then in your vocabulary lesson today, one entire page is just about the prefix ante, which means before or in front of. So they give you lots of examples and you get to see some different words. And then on the other page, you're going to use words that were more commonly used in history, but not as much anymore. Again, if you don't know the definitions of any of these words, I encourage you to look them up on dictionary.com or a dictionary if you have one. The whole goal of doing this vocabulary book is so that you are aware of more words and their definitions, which again, makes you better writers and better readers. Hope you guys are hanging in there. I'd love to hear from you. Talk to you soon.